it just, when we think of storytelling, for me, it's all about the stories of humanity. I mean, it's the human condition. Whether it's a play or a composition, or a piece of art, there's something behind it that's somehow touching humanity. And that's where as a broker, as someone who gets to match people together, I feel like I'm doing something important for the community. It's a service.
Yeah, matchmaker. That's another way. Storybroker's probably better, but matchmaker is also.
That was what I used to use before I thought of storybroker.
That was the voice of the executive director of the Norton Center for the Arts and master storybroker, Steve Hoffman, and it is my absolute delight to have him on as the guest of this episode of the Page and Stage podcast, where we explore the art and craft of writing and performance. As always, I'm your host, Jason Cannon, and this week we dig deep into the magic and science of season programming. Steve and I talk about the power of art to build community, the vital role of the storybroker, and how Steve makes sure that his performing arts center punches above its weight. Before we get to all that, though, quick disclaimer. You'll probably see, if you're on YouTube with me, you're going to see that there's a bit of some video glitching going on. I'm not at home. I'm up in Michigan on a sort of work vacation with my beloved Rebecca. She's helping her sister restart a summer rec camp that they did as kids, and it is really a joy to watch them put this thing together for this community here. In a way, they're doing a lot of the same work that my guest today, Steve, is doing, connecting, instead of arts, they're connecting recreation and physical activity with a lot of the kids who aren't in school right now. And man, I dropped lunch off for them, and it is a lot of energy. But also, you'll see if you're on YouTube with me that my shirt is different, my glasses are different, my background isn't as clean, all this. The sound is probably not quite as good. I'm doing this on my phone in our Airbnb up in Harbor Beach, Michigan. So I thank you in advance for your grace. When we get to my actual conversation with Steve that I recorded a few weeks back, everything will be as normal. Those of you just listening on Substack or Spotify or Apple, wherever you are, thank you. This experience probably is pretty much the same for you. So this disclaimer is pretty much just for my YouTube audience. Also, like always, this podcast is just one part of my story coaching work. You can go check out pageandstage.art. That's pageandstage.art. You can see the rest of my story coaching work, my podcasts, my newsletter, my books, all that good stuff. I encourage you to go check it out. But I want to get back to my conversation with Steve Hoffman. Let me tell you a bit more about him. His entire bio is in the show notes, so go check that out. But I got to tell you, I met Steve a few months ago. We took the show Last Out to the Norton Center for the Performing Arts at Center College in Kentucky. And Steve, I got to tell you, I've been touring a long time. I have done so many different theater tours, and Steve might be the best host I've ever experienced. He was amazing. There wasn't a single obstacle that came up that he didn't immediately jump right on. The thing about Steve is his passion for bringing art to his community, for bringing storytellers together with an audience, it's incredible. You know that there have to be people in the middle, right? A lot of storytellers aren't necessarily the best at marketing, aren't necessarily the best at finding their own audience. Steve lives and breathes the art and science of connecting people with the stories and the music and the dance that can transport them. And not only the shows itself, but he is a genius at creating secondary activities, connective activities. You're going to hear a lot about that in my conversation with him. But man, he will just, if you've been on the fence about buying a subscription for your local performing arts center, Steve's going to push you over that edge. So yeah, go check out his bio, check out all of his links in the show notes. But now just here we go with my conversation with Steve Hoffman. All right, I am online here with the one and only Steve Hoffman. This is such a treat. So Steve and I crossed paths on the Last Out tour when was that, Steve? Longer than I'm thinking.
November, Veterans Day weekend.
That's right. November of 24. It doesn't seem that long ago.
Yet it also seems forever ago. Well,
Yes, that's true. Yes, it also does. Yeah, time does that thing. So good to see you again, Steve, and thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So let's jump right in here with the storyteller's origin story. So we're gonna get to all the kind of the cool angles we have with you here, but there's always that moment that an actor or a dancer or a painter or anyone in kind of our business, there's that moment where they saw that show or they had that moment where suddenly they have to go into the arts. And I'm curious for little Steve Hoffman, what was the moment that Steve Hoffman realized he needed to go into the theater?
Well, I grew up playing the cello and I saw Rostropovich and I listened to a lot of Yo Yo Ma and I knew that Yo Yo broke me. I was not going to be in this profession, although I love the music. At the same time, I listened to a lot of rock music. And what really my spark was the Electric Light Orchestra.
Yellow, yeah.
Back in like 1979, 1980, I went to see them when I lived in New York or New Jersey. I went to see them. It was my very first rock concert. And I'm looking around, I'm having this experience, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to bring in a group like ELO and share it in a community. I didn't know, I knew there was someone who has to do that. I didn't know the term concert promoter. That's not where I ended up, but I do that. I'm more on the nonprofit side of things, a little more cultural, but I also do some of the more. I've been able to bring in a show that features the former members of ELO. So it
Came
was full
full
circle a
circle.
couple of years ago. So, and I got to talk with some of the guys that I had seen perform and have on the albums, and that really was incredible.
Okay, so even the way you just framed that, Steve, is really interesting. That when you saw this concert, you weren't saying, "Oh, I have to be on the stage." You were
Mm-mm.
saying, "I want to facilitate this experience." Like you were in the audience, which is a collective, but as the individual, Steve, you kind of stuck your head up and went, I want to make this happen for all these people.
Yeah,
And as we've talked, you sent me a note. You think of yourself as a story broker.
right.
I love that. I would love you to kind of dig into. So keep going with your story because you've ended up now. You work at Center College in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what was your then path once you realized that you wanted to be someone who could facilitate these sorts of experiences and connect artists with their audience? How did you make that happen for yourself?
Well, what it's become, my mantra kind of is I really like to turn people on to new things and I like to discover them and then be able to share them with people, friends or community members. When I started looking at colleges, I saw that the University of Illinois, and at that time I was living outside of Chicago, the University of Illinois had a student organization that actually booked rock concerts and did all of the hospitality and the ushering and the security and the load in and the marketing, did everything. And I'm not talking about the regional band. I'm talking when I got involved, I went to the University of Illinois. I got accepted into this program called Star Course. And we were bringing in everything from Psychedelic Furs, Echo and the Bunnymen, to Al Di Meola, and then Peter Gabriel, REM, U2, ZZ Top, Dolly Parton. I mean, so we got involved. And the bigger shows that were at the arena, those were being brought in by the promoter who runs the arena. However, we got involved to do house management and we still were involved. And they were just amazing experiences. Through that, I did that 3 of my years. And one of the bands, I was about ready to leave for class and they're getting all loaded in during the day. And I said, is there anything I can do before I go or when I come back? He's like, yeah, can you get me some cocaine? And I'm like, no. And I left. And that was kind of the start of, I don't think I want to do the rock concert exclusively. And I started to discover that there's more to promoting and now what I consider is a presenting for nonprofit organizations. I can then do even more than the concerts that exploit.
Yeah.
I want to nurture an artist and help them succeed and not just have a gig that we're playing, we're another stop on their date, and try to find activities. And that's where the storyboker comes in, is trying to find that mix every year of a season that'll include dance and classical music and country music and theater, Broadway, all of the different disciplines, and find that mix and then build trust with the community and really bring these arts together. Sometimes people only want to come to the country concerts, and that's okay. Others, some of our most loyal patrons at the Norton Center, they come, they want to take the risk and come to all of the different programs, and they come back saying, wow, I never thought I'd like that classical solo accordion player
Right.
we had this past year, and it was fantastic. And they said, you know, exceeded my expectations of attendance for that show, and that's just we're building an audience, and they trust what we're doing, and that's where I kind of come in as a story broker. That I am trying to take other people's stories and an audience and pull them together.
Yeah, because there's a space. There's a space between the storyteller and the audience. And
Mm-hmm.
something I'm sure you've seen this too. I mean, having spent so many years in the theater, and now I'm so much more into the writing and coaching. Something we forget show business, and how few of the artists actually are good at promotion. How few
Mm-hmm.
artists actually understand how marketing works. How few artists understand that they are not entitled to an audience, and that someone like you, it's yeah, it's less of a middleman and more of almost a building bridges, or building that connective tissue between how does someone, because it's not even just, you're not even necessarily just promoting. Now, yes, you are selling to your community, which I want to talk about too, but you are literally forging. I mean, broker is such a great word. You're forging these connections between people who want an audience who want the work.
Right. And I mentor classical musicians through a program, a national program, and when we do a panel and talk about the role of the presenter, I always tell the musicians, and this applies to any artist, visual or performing arts, I said, you're the artist and you have a vision, and there's an audience that you want to reach. Everything else in the middle is just stuff. And really, the core essence of all of this is getting your art to the public and to an audience. And they have an agent and they have a manager and they have publicity. I mean, in some variation thereof, or they're doing it themselves. I'm trying to bring to the community. So I'm always seeking and trying to I curate a season where I'm trying to have a storyline within the season through the flow of the different shows that we're bringing to the community.
That's amazing. I'm going to stick a pin in that, Steve, and come back to that because that's awesome. I want to go back really quick though. You say it was Star Course at
Right.
University of Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
Star Course. So when you graduated, like, what was your degree?
Well, that's funny that you say that. And Star Course, it's a student-run organization. It's like a club, but
Oh,
all of the managers are students. There's an advisor who's just very loosely. I mean, the two senior managers actually negotiated the contracts with the agents for the artists. I mean, it was the real deal. And I was studying actuarial science. I was studying math and statistics and doing this as my fun side project, thinking I'll never make a go at it. So I need my backup.
right.
And in my junior year, I was offered one of the senior manager positions and I accepted it. And then after spring break, came back and said, I'm going to withdraw because I'm not going to be successful with actuary work if I do both. And after that, I realized I just made a mistake. And they'd already found a replacement and said sorry. So I just started working at the theater itself and did theater management. I was doing crowd management, I was working backstage. So I was getting now paid to do these things that as a volunteer, as a student, I was doing. So I was building a shop. And from there, I went to when I graduated, I worked at the Ravinia Festival in the summertime and between during college. But when I graduated, I found a job at a international art publishing company, and they were based out of London. And the US distributor was in the suburbs of Chicago, really close to where I lived. And I'm like, they're looking for a clerk, and it's arts and administration. Okay, this is where I'm going to go. So I got the job there. And what I really learned was entrepreneurship and business. And I left that pretty quickly. I kept getting my boss just kept giving me raises and raises, and it was amazing. He's giving me all these opportunities. And I finally went up to him and said, I'm taking another job. It's a 50% cut in salary, but it's at the Goodman Theater in Chicago, which is like one of the top tier regional theaters in the country. And I needed that experience. So I worked there for a season, and I'm watching. I had no insurance, no health, no benefits at all.
Of course
I
not.
think I figured out I was making like $2 an hour when it all came together for the number of hours I was working. And I noticed everyone above me was about my just a year or two older than me. I wasn't going to get anywhere to climb that ladder from being in operations and house management. So I went to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin. And while I was there, I advised students who booked rock concerts. So I did the contract work. I helped them. They programmed 5 shows a week, and that included an open mic night and a couple of local things. But the weekends usually were big name shows at the time, like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and
Whoa.
Fish. The band Fish, we were doing when they were on their early rise. So I really tried to help them, instead of filling dates, learn how to program for a community. And I was doing their administrative and contract negotiation and all of that. I left there to do when I graduated with my master's, and I went to the University of Michigan, where I worked for their student productions.
Okay.
So all of the theater performances and the musical theater and the dance performances and opera through the program. So it's graduate and undergraduate level students. And I did all the marketing for those seasons. And it was it's not just like we do 3. We did,
No, it's huge. Yeah.
yeah, it was huge. I learned more of the marketing skills. So each time I'm going somewhere, I'm learning something new and being able to keep the skills that I was learning to advance my career. I went to New York and ran a summer festival after that as part of an arts council. And the arts council really kicked off how to work with a community and think about the community and the arts, and having that marriage of the two and the synergies. So it was an outdoor summer festival, 6 nights a week for 8.5 weeks. And so I had Mondays off, but it was local, national, international artists. So I was programming for 4 years really intensely. And then I did professional development type activities during the year for arts organizations in the community. I went to South Dakota. I got hired to start an organization that was a performing arts center, a science center with over 100 hands-on exhibits, an Omnimax theater, and an art center with 7 galleries. And the performing arts center had 1,900 and 300 seat theaters. But when I got there, it had nothing. It was just this empty shell. They were converting an old, beautiful high school, historic high school in downtown Sioux Falls, into this facility. And 2 years later, I was doing all the programming for 9 years of the Performing Arts Center, and I was CEO of the entire complex. And I
Wow.
really learned community. I mean, that was an amazing 11 years to get to work with the community. And I thought, okay, I saw an opportunity that was close to my parents in Monterey, California, at the National Steinbeck Center. And it was all about the life work and philosophies of John Steinbeck. And it was a history museum for him, and then an art gallery space and an agriculture museum, because Salinas, California, where Steinbeck grew up, is the lettuce capital of the world. It's where the ice packed vegetables on train cars going across the country was created. So
Yeah.
it was a significant part of culture in that area too. And then after that, I came here and I've been at the Norton Center in Danville, Kentucky at Center College for today actually is my 15th anniversary for 15th year anniversary. So
Holy moly!
I
Happy anniversary!
thanks. And really, what I've focused on a lot here is engagement. So, not only bringing an artist to the community and bringing the community to the program, but finding ways to make those programs relevant and bring in audience members who might not have ever thought that they were going to come to see a show at the Norton Center, at a performing arts center, and help them find the connection. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Last Out, and that really drills down to the point that, you know, what my passion is now is making the arts relevant. And I also am an instructor. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky, and I teach a graduate course called Making the Arts Relevant in Your Community.
Oh wow, man! That title just wraps up. That's like the perfect summation of everything. Like your whole life journey there. What a perfect encapsulation of what you've learned and what you're passionate about doing. That's incredible. So you're
I feel pretty fortunate.
Center College is okay with you moonlighting at UK
They didn't have opportunities for me to teach here, and
to
as long
teach
as I
there.
can get the job done, and I've only really taught in the summer terms, so that it's a little slower for me here, and I can really be able to do both.
Yeah. Quick side note, just because you're probably the the you mentioned the ice packed vegetables out of Salinas. Because just north of me here in Tampa, I remember I was at, I forget which restaurant, maybe the Columbia or something, but they had a little trivia thing talking about the term iceberg lettuce, and that it was because
Mm,
those lettuces were frozen, come across the country, and literally the guys at the station who were unloading, here come the icebergs, because they were like basically
I
like
didn't even know
huge
that.
snowball. Yo, I figured you would know that because, but who knows if it's true? Who knows? I read it on a restaurant menu.
It makes sense. It
It
certainly
does.
does.
It totally does. So, really quick, just because you said you took that job in California at the Steinbeck Center to be near your parents, what then leveraged you? Because you were bouncing all over the country. What got you to Kentucky? What exactly 15 years ago? What was it that
Right.
drew you to Norton Center at Center College? What was the opportunity you saw there?
Well, it was an opportunity came up to leave the institution and at the Steinbeck Center, and I was looking for a new place, and this opportunity at Center College came up, and we looked at it. We really weighed it. I feel like I've always programmed as if I were on a college or university campus, so this really was a nice fit, and it allowed me to really focus on the performing arts, although I am curating and working with artists to curate other exhibits that we have in the building as well.
Great. Before we
And I
dig
love
into,
synergy.
oh, exactly. And that's exactly where we're going next. But I did have one question. You mentioned this a while ago. For you, as a storyboker now, that's kind of this wonderful
Mm-hmm.
term you've coined for yourself. What is the difference between promoting, producing, and presenting coming from your
Mm-hmm.
point of view?
So producing is taking from scratch the script or the idea, because it could be music, and picking the compositions, selecting the artwork, and finding people to perform it, actors, whatever, musicians, all the different people that would take to perform it, and keeping it running for several, a little bit of time. It could be one day, but it also can be Hamilton for 3 months traveling. That's a
Yeah.
production. The producers produce that production. As a presenter, I then work with the agent that when it's touring and secure it to come to our community, negotiate for a way to bring it. And the difference for me between a presenter and a promoter, promoters are typically looking for how to make the buck. They are usually for profit, a lot of times independent, but they're looking at it, I would say, purely from a monetary standpoint. And a lot of times when you look at an arena or a stadium or something like that, and the shows intermingle with the basketball and the hockey or whatever sports, someone's coming in and they're paying to rent the space and they're paying to bring in the show, and the venue itself doesn't have a whole lot of skin in the game. They're not necessarily curating and making a decision, they're just renting. And as a presenter, I'm really trying to find ways to introduce specific art forms to communities.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go down that path, this presenter thing, because you've talked a lot about community and the storyline through a season. So, like, we'll take
Mm-hmm.
Norton, for example, where you currently are, Center College, but it's the Norton Center for Performing Arts, right? Even though it's not like a nonprofit theater or a regional theater or a for profit organization, I've got to think you think in terms of brand, in terms of, uh, like you say, if you're trying to not just give things to the community, but bring new people into your building and keep building that synergistic communal feeling. When you got to Norton, did it already have an established sort of brand or voice or whatever? There might be a term you use for yourself in terms of the identity. When people think of Norton, what do they think of? Right? What was it when you got there, and what have you kind of evolved that into over your 15 years?
So the Norton Center has always been a place in rural central Kentucky that's bringing in artists that are just at top level, from high end orchestras from around the world to Aretha Franklin to the Broadway touring companies. I mean, it always, as the college president who retired used to say, punched before above its weight. And it really has brought to this region so many different things. I think what stood out most from the previous director was building an orchestra season every year, to have at least one major orchestra. When I got here, the parameters changed. The people who could help fund the orchestra, because it wasn't a moneymaker, and we do have an obligation to meet our budgets. So I started to do an orchestra one year and a chamber orchestra the next year, and start and make sure that we have classical, but always still bringing Dolly Parton, Yo-Yo Ma, so trying to bring in excellence. And Dolly Parton is more pop and country, and that's part of bringing people into the building, and for the college to be known for bringing artists of that caliber and students having that experience. And we have students working these events, either backstage, front of house, administrative. So the student experience is also important to what we're doing.
That was going to be my exact next question, Steve, is how, because you're on a college campus, what is the relationship like between the Norton Center for Performing Arts and the Center College's theater and dance and music department? Do they perform in that space? Is it kind of a hybrid? Is it just for, you just mentioned the students work the show, much like you said you used to do yourself. What is that relationship between the Performing Arts Center and the college itself?
So we are a part of the college. Our building actually houses the music and theater departments programs, and has studio space and classrooms and offices on an extended wall beyond the performance venues. And we work together. Student programming happens on the Norton Center stages, and they get blocks of time to build the set and rehearse and get everything put together. Have a weekend run, a 4-show run. And one of the shows they did recently was John Proctor is the Villain, which was
Whoa!
just on Broadway.
Whoa!
And
Yeah, seriously.
now, what's really cool about it is they were the first group of people, not just students, to do the production. It was in treatment lab form, because the relationship that the college's theater department has with the Farm, which is the New York theater company that creates new works, that was a piece that they started to create. And the Farm works with different colleges to treat it and to see how it goes, and use actors and help them develop skills. So we were the first to actually perform and produce John Proctor as the villain. And to
Wow.
see for our students to get to say, I was involved in something that just, was nominated for all of these Tony Awards and it's on Broadway. I mean, that's huge. That
Yeah.
experience, that's amazing. And I'm so proud to be part of something. I didn't have anything to do with it, but it was part of our facility, part of our campus, and that student experience. So we do work with the students performing as well. We don't produce it, the departments do, the faculty do, but we work on scheduling spaces. The other part of that is, so I'll bring in a theater company, I'll bring in a circ company. This year I brought in a couple of circ companies, and I try to find different ways to connect with the students to have activities. So we brought in one circ activity, and I contacted the theater professor who he was teaching a course on movement theater. I'm like, okay, can we get you and these performers together and they'll do a workshop? They will introduce circ performance, and they built pyramids and with people, and I mean they did improv. It was really special for them to have that one-on-one experience, not just seeing the show, but actually working with the professional artists in a way to extend their academic experience. So I do that with the music and the theater faculty, but I also go beyond that. I work with the sociology and anthropology and philosophy and ethics and science professors for different programs to connect their students with the arts. A lot of times I have the faculty serve as moderators for a panel discussion with an artist about what it's like to be a woman in Brazil being a pop star, and what's your background, or in Africa. And someone talked about her parents not like forbidding her to go into the arts. It was okay when she was growing up, but when it was time to then get settled, get married, have a family, they said, you're done. And she left the country. She just had to pursue her dreams. So having those conversations with students is equally as valuable as having a master class. So we really go deep with the arts to make it relevant, and to make it relevant to the academics as well.
Yeah, I got to think, especially being on a college campus, it's such a great incubator and lab and experimental space for all this kind of stuff. Are there ever moments though where like I was at a university once, production manager of the season, teaching classes. We had a big performing arts center, and the tension in the scheduling, the tension between having to meet this huge facilities budget versus the student shows aren't going to make money, right? But they and it often felt like I was getting just peanuts. So here's your 2 weeks. Part of that comes down to leadership and mission, I'm sure, but when it comes to scheduling, how far out in advance do you have to schedule this stuff? Do you ever have theater department faculty coming at you with pitchforks?
Yeah, well, we have a great relationship. And in fact, with the theater department, because they need 3 weeks at a time, three chunks of 3 weeks, 3 times a year, they get on the schedule first. And
Right.
then I start filling in with what we can do. And I know there's other single day or 2 day activities throughout the year that are automatic, and I fill those dates in right away and block them. But we schedule then the music program with their concerts, and they need rehearsal time. There's a little more flexibility there. There's speaking engagements that the library does, and they typically want a Monday. So that makes it easier before I'm done programming to just put them on a Monday to accommodate and let them keep going with their programming. So we get along really well. There are times that with the theater program in particular, I have had to say, that this weekend is your run weekend. And I have Yo-Yo Ma on that Friday night, and I can't move that date, and I'm not going to move that date.
Right,
And
right.
they understand that. So we work together, but there's so much time in advance that we're planning all of this. It's a year out. We're just going to start planning next year's over the summer, getting the schedule set so that we do. And if they need some extra concession, we can work with them just as well. So we keep the master calendar for those two spaces, and anyone on campus needs to come to us, and we have a vetting system to make sure that those dates are available backstage, front of house, you know, and we can make that happen. They don't
Yeah.
always know what we're working on, that someone else put a hold on that date or
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yo Yo Ma, okay, okay, but Steve Hoffman's solo cello night, maybe move that one.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I can get them out of the room very quickly.
Really quick, want to toot your horn for 1 second. In 2023, the Arts Commission of Danville Boyle County selected you as Arts Citizen of the Year. So first of all, congratulations. That sounds really, really cool. What precipitated that? What does that award mean? Was it something you were nominated for? And how do you feel in terms of how that reflects on how much you've invested in the community?
I never expected it, and there's no application. The board for the Arts Commission, which serves the entire county, the board makes recommendations and they make the selection process and vote. And they called me one day. I actually was at a conference in New York, a booking conference, and the director of the commission called and told me the news. And I was like, really? Wow. I mean, because I'm so involved in the community programming, but also I'm an advocate. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce board. I'm on an early childhood literacy program board. I've been on the Art Center board. So I get involved in the community and really look at the whole picture. It's not always about the arts, and it's not always about the Norton Center's programming, but the whole vision of what can happen in a community. So I felt really fortunate. That was such a great gesture, and it was our 50th anniversary for the institution. So that also was nice, and they gave a special award to the institution as Arts Organization of the Year in recognition of its 50th. But they don't often do an arts organization.
That's really, really cool. So before we
I
pivot
was
into last, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's what a wonderful acknowledgement of just how much actually goes in. Because for the audience, and honestly, too, probably for a lot of the artists, they don't realize how much work goes into just making that night happen, right? The 2 hours traffic on stage takes hundreds of hours to get there, right?
We talk about that almost daily, that we do too good of a job to just make it seem like people just walk in the door, the show happens, and they don't, and they shouldn't know the work that goes into it. But
Absolutely.
some people do need to. I mean, when budgets are getting reviewed and positions are getting reviewed, you really want them to know how much work actually goes in. And I'm starting to program for the 26-27 season, and we just launched it this past Friday. Tickets for subscriptions just went on sale, and I'm already starting to put dates on hold for the following season. And it's just how it works, and it's a machine. And I would say that people who work in theater and art centers are extremely underappreciated, because people just don't know what happens, what it takes to produce a show or present a show. And it's not just getting together, drinking coffee and reading scripts together. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. And if there's one thing I wish people really understood, that just so that they would appreciate it even more, that a Broadway show that's amazing, has a full set and lighting and special effects. They came in with 2 or 3 semi trucks that morning at 6 a.m. so that at 7:30 p.m. the doors can open, and that show, the curtain goes up, and it looks like they've been here on Broadway. It's just there always. And then right after the show, within a couple of hours, that stage is empty again.
Yeah, and that's the
So
stuff.
it's magic.
Yeah, that is, but magic is just the hard work you don't see, right? Like I just saw a
Yep.
picture today. I was posting my newsletter to social media, and a little thing popped up. It was they had just wrapped filming for Only Murders in the Building, the next season. So the top picture was just the 3 stars, You know,
Hmm.
Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and Martin Short, just the three stars, just the three of them. And then below that was the picture of the three of them with the entire crew, 50 people, right? Everyone else who's on that set that you don't see in the final product on Hulu, right? But kudos to them to say, look, we're just the pretty faces. The actual work, look at all these people. Look what it takes to actually bring this story to you. Man, man.
I try the caterer, the person who's cleaning up at the end of the day, every single person is needed to make an event happen and to make a production, make a show happen. And they're necessary. I mean, otherwise people are doing more and more, but there is no small role in the arts. Everyone has an important part of it, whether it's selling tickets or the box office or answering the phones or marketing backstage. We all have an important role for that magic to happen.
Yeah. Let me, before we get to Last Out, because I think it's going to be a really fascinating kind of test case to show how this actually operates in real
Yeah.
time. Making the arts relevant to your community. You even teach a class, that's the name of your class over at University of Kentucky, right? Making the arts relevant to your
Hmm.
community. And you've talked about creating a storyline when you program that even the season wants to have some sort of cohesive, I don't want to say theme, but you mentioned there's a storyline. You take, especially subscribers, you're taking them on a ride through that 9 month
Hmm.
season. Talk a little bit about what that feels like, looks like, what kind of that thought process is. Like, who comes after Yo-Yo Ma? How do you balance that, right? Does the theater faculty tell you in advance what their season's going to be? And does that come into play in how you program around the shows that are going to be locked in for those 3 weeks? How do you tell a story through programming a 9 month season?
All of that, yes. The answer is yes, because I like to say that what I do is very organic and it bounces off of what's happening on campus. It's happening, what's happening in the community, what's happening nationally, globally. I joke and call it the arts food groups. You know, you have the food pyramid and you have a certain number of different things you're supposed to eat every day. So I always look at a season and say, you know, we've got the pops, you know, like rock and pop and comedy. We have theater, musical theater. We have dance. I'm always trying to make sure that at least one dance. And you had asked me what I think I brought to the organization in these 15 years. The one is the engagement and getting the arts connected to the community. The other is I've really started to focus on roots music, bluegrass. Hey, we're in the bluegrass state.
Yeah.
And you can see bluegrass music free anywhere you go. So that was my challenge. We started looking at more Americana bluegrass, something with the twist. If we do bluegrass, it's going to be spot on I mean, just the highest we've had. Actually, last year, Allison Brown is a banjo player, and she used to play in Steve Martin's band as a banjo player, and he plays banjo. So
Right.
the two of them are actually in charge of the Steve Martin annual banjo award to the banjo player of the year every year. So she is his kind of voice to help guide and make those selections. So to have her on our series was really incredible. She's also a record label owner. So, you know, it's then we can look at her experiences in the business sense as well. So it really trying to find those mixes, bringing in that accordion player, that classical accordion player. And I worked with the college's diversity office. I worked with the anthropology, the sociology office department. There was a class being taught on meditation and the arts and culture. And I was looking at Hansi's Instagram and I noticed that she's a certified yoga instructor. So I asked, have you ever done would you do a teach a meditation session, lead a session or yoga for the campus and the community? And while you're here, we don't have any accordion students to a master class with. So can we tap into that part of your experience? She's like, I've never done that before, but sure. And I said, well, maybe at the end of the meditation session, you can play the accordion. And she's like, oh, I'd love, yeah, that would be perfect. I said, but we're not going to tell anybody in the advertising that it's meditation with
With
some
accordion.
accordion music, because that just doesn't, it seems like an oxymoron. You don't, but we just surprised them. And we had about 50 people on the stage meditating. She led them through the session. And at the end, she pulls up her accordion while they're all laying down with their eyes closed. And she started to play, I think it was some Bach. And it was magical. And everyone walked away. We had subscribers, we had students. They walked away going, what an incredible experience.
Oh man.
So that's the kind of thing that I really love to
It,
pair, to kind
yeah.
of put together within the shows. We have those programs, which I call primary activities, and then we have the secondary, the linking activities that I think draw more people and get them connected to an artist or to a theme.
Yeah, because someone may come see Allison perform just the show and be, well, that was really cool. But someone who gets to sit with her and then see a different human side of her, and maybe even, get one-on-one time with her because it's 50 people as opposed to 500. That's how you make a lifelong fan too, right?
Right.
It's nonstop. It sounds like you're also doing nonstop outreach, basically. That the performances,
It's
these.
continuous.
I love that you said linking. Like secondary feels like it kind of pushes it down, but linking activities just is building. It's building. It's building.
Well, and you asked about how to partner with these different areas. Do I wait to find out what they're doing? Sometimes I'll build activities or performances to bring in connected to something else that's going on. Other times it's just a happy coincidence. I was bringing in a dance company called Momix, and we were doing their production of Alice, which is very loosely based on Alice in Wonderland. And I found that we set the schedule for the school's theater productions, and I mentioned, hey, I just want to let you know we're doing this one production, Alice. And she said, I'm looking at doing, it's a, now the title of the play just went away. It was a contemporary play of Alice in Wonderland. It was just on
Oh,
Broadway recently. She said, we're doing that play. I said, okay, we are going to partner, and we'll make sure the dancers can do a workshop with the actors who are going to be in this production. We got the library, the campus library, and the public library involved to do displays. The campus library wanted to have a Mad Hatter tea party to
oh,
bring in students to the library, and this was the theme. The student activities group said, or student affairs, they wanted to be involved. So we just put together this program that served everybody, and we can promote to everybody, and it just
mhm.
lifts and makes it even more relevant and more, just more, period.
Yeah, yeah. It makes more noise, right? A one-off performance, but then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you have these 5 ancillary events, all also, and then it takes on a life of its own, right? It's way more likely to break through. I mean, because we are assaulted with ads and with events and with things to do and with screens, and the way to cut through that sometimes is by doing exactly what you're doing. Is it's not one thing, it's six all at once. That's really cool.
And helping other people achieve their goals. To
Right.
me, the best kind of partnership or collaboration is looking at the other a partner's goals and seeing how the program you're asking them to be involved with, how it's going to help them be successful. And we're all using one activity that normally would take the bandwidth of 2 or 3 activities, but partnering, we're all sharing, but achieving our own goals and building constituents, because I'm going to let our subscribers know that this is happening in this organization, and they're going
Yeah.
to let people know, so it really, again, truly builds community.
Great. All right. So this is all wonderful setup because, again, as we mentioned way back, you and I met because we brought Last Out to Center College to Norton, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think what here's your on ramp, Steve. Was Last Out part of the season programming? Was it a special event that you snuck in? Why did you decide that needed to happen in your facility for your community? And how did you then build out all these linking activities?
go
Go.
and go. I actually, I go to the grocery store, I go to the Walmart, I go different places, and un- inevitably someone's going to come up and say at a restaurant, say, have you heard about this show, or have you ever considered booking this group and bringing them? And it's constant, and you know what, I love it because that means I'm approachable and they feel like they have some ownership. And I
Exactly.
always say, if I don't know the group, let me research it and I'll take a look. I can't promise anything. So I got a phone call from someone who said there's this show called Last Out by Scott Mann. You really need to check it out. And I'm like, okay, it's a play. Okay, whose cousins, nephews, whatever is putting this on? How are you related? But he wasn't. He actually hadn't even seen the production at the time yet. But he said, I've talked with the playwright and at the time the lead actor, Scott, and he seems like a great guy. If you don't mind, I can put the two of you together. So here's someone who hasn't even seen the play, but they've had some conversations. And I'm like, so hearing that, and then I am an Army brat. So military, I grew up going from station, base to base. It made me start thinking in terms of diversity and inclusion, that as an Army brat, I was always the outsider. I was always cast just on the perimeter, and that families, and this play is all about not only the soldiers that are making sacrifices for our freedom, but also the families that are making sacrifices. So I was like, I hope this is a good production. So I flew out to Tulsa, to not to Tulsa, to Topeka, and met with them. And I saw the show twice. I bawled both times because it was such an amazing production. I got to know the cast a little bit, and we started a conversation. And I said, let's try for the year after next to get you to come. And we ultimately made it happen. I wanted to get it as close to Veterans Day as possible so that I had a way to make it relevant at that moment. I have connections in the community from other times that I've brought in military themed productions. So I went to the community hospice organization, and there's a woman who works there, and she is the liaison to veterans. So I contacted her right away and said, how do we get word about this production to the veterans in our region? So she really was a conduit, and she said, by the way, we do a veterans free lunch for in honor of Veterans Day every year, and we get at least 600 people coming to that lunch. And I was like, is there any way that Scott might be able to speak at that event? And, can we promote it? And she's like, well, I'll take the flyers. And when I go to the VFWs and the different places where they're in the senior centers, I'll make sure they're getting the word. And I'm not sure about him speaking because that program is pretty tight. So I said, that's fine. But we fast forward to that event, and Scott came, and she knew he was coming, and I had made the introduction already. She's like, well, I've got 5 minutes for him. And he's characteristic, charming person. And
Yeah.
he spoke from his personal experiences, which was so relatable to every single veteran in the room, that whether or not it brought people to see the play after that evening was not as important to me as making that connection that the Norton Center is actually making these programs happen in our community. And we did get a few people who were at the lunch that came to the evening show, and they spoke afterward. We had a Q&A, a panel, with all of the performers and with Scott. I had the diversity office on campus does a building bridges day every year that also happens to be that same time of year. So I arranged for that Thursday activity for. I said to the diversity officer, I said, I've got an idea for a diverse program. Now hear me out. It's a straight white older guy, diversity. And she looks at me, she's like, I'm listening. I said, military, and it's about being an outsider with the families not being connected to community. And, these are people that are trying to ensure our communities thrive. And she said, I love it. Let's do it. And it was such a powerful program. And we had, I don't know how many hundreds of students and faculty and staff and community members come to his keynote. But again, not only is it helping promote the performance the next night, it's a way to build that bridge and demonstrate the power of the arts in a community and how it's not just putting on a play. We also had a Gold Star family ceremony for people who have lost in this case, two families from our region who lost children to either combat or related mental health issues, suicide, related to combat. And that was so powerful. That was right on stage, right before the show started. And then the next morning, we did a writing workshop, a storytelling workshop called Generosity of Scars. And we had some students attend. We had those Gold Star families attend. We had people that came to the Veterans Lunch attend. I mean, it really was an amazing group of people participate. And that helped them with their own healing, and to hear the stories of what they're going through. It just, when we think of storytelling, for me, it's all about the stories of humanity. I mean, it's the human condition. Whether it's a play or a composition, or a piece of art, there's something behind it that's somehow touching humanity. And that's where I, as a broker, as someone who gets to match people together, I feel like I'm doing something important for the community. It's a service.
Yeah, matchmaker. That's another way. Storybroker's probably better, but matchmaker is also.
That was what I used to use before I thought of storyboker.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Steve, this is so great. I think it's so instructive and informative for my listeners too. I mean, a lot of the times I have authors and actors and directors on my podcast, and to get this particular a diverse point of view in terms of how storytelling works, I think is so fascinating. We can get going, but I want to be cognizant of your time because I know you're right in the middle of it. So we're going to turn to the spotlight here to wrap up. So I got a couple questions for you. What is your favorite story that you're currently reading or watching?
Wow. You're going to have to edit this out because I'm going to have to think for a minute.
Edit out the thinking. That's fine.
Dead silence. I recently watched White Lotus, and the storyline for all 3 seasons was just, someone told me, because I also write and I do photography, but with the writing, they always say, just constantly put the characters in the worst case situations, and that creates the tension. So for a play, you don't want it to be a lovely play that really, just doesn't go anywhere. It's not, you want a bite. You want people to lean in. And when people say sit back and enjoy the show, I want audiences to lean forward and be part of the show, that synergy. So when I was watching White Lotus, it was like this constant train wreck. And it was also about the human condition, because it was a class, like the workers and the elite coming together, and the family dynamics. It really spoke to that human condition on so many different levels. And it just kept you in suspense. So that's something that I found valuable, and I appreciated it. I mean, it was disturbing as a show, and I'm not going to spoil any of it, but if you haven't seen it and you want to see something squeamish, make you squirm and have to see the next episode, even though you're like, oh, what happened? That probably is the story most recently that stays on my mind.
Cool. Yeah, I in my classes, I talk about this a lot, that we don't want to watch a play or read a story where it's too easy for the character. We love our characters. We invented them. We want to take care of them. But no, you have to kind of torture them to make the story actually worth reading. Because of the job you do, how about this? Is there, you mentioned like this classical accordionist, and you've mentioned other people that do amazing things. Is there, probably easiest would be, is there a musical artist who's come through that who you've booked recently that you think we should all run to Spotify or Apple Music and download their album right away?
Wow. I mean, there's so many. And of course, now you ask, I have to look at the programs. Oh, the album, because unfortunately one of the performers has passed away. It's a trio with Bela Fleck, Edgar Meyer, who's a phenomenal bass player and composer, crosses over with roots and bluegrass to classical. He's won Grammys, I think, in both categories, and he plays with Yo-Yo Ma. Bela Fleck is a virtuosic banjo player and composer, and Zakir Hussain, who is this tabla player who, as it was described to me, when he is in India, people will go down on their knees and kiss his feet. He's is one of the stellar, and unfortunately in the last year he passed away, but there's still recordings, and had the three of them on a tour to promote a new album. And as soon as I heard the new album, I'm like, gosh, this is Grammy material, and they won the Grammy. So it was really amazing. So Bela Fleck, Edgar Meyer, and Zakir Hussain, they have two albums out. I've been listening to the most recent one, but they were again magic because
Cool.
they're three completely different sounds
Yeah.
blending together in this synergy, different worlds, different cultures. It really was magic.
I will look those up and put links in the show notes. Holy moly. All right. Next question. If you could ask any one person any one question, who would that person be and what would you ask them?
Well, my father passed away a few years ago, and I always ask him questions. I never get an answer. And the one question, if I could ask him, like legit one question, I would just, what's up? How are you doing?
That's lovely. That's awesome. Um, all right. What is the best advice that you have ever taken?
And this one, it still rings true. When I was trying to figure out my career and fast track versus taking these different positions and building the different skills, someone said, are you in this for a sprint or a marathon? Is this long distance running, or are you just getting to the end? And for me, in this instance, it's about the journey and taking that long distance run versus just instant gratification to get to the end.
That's great. Oh
So
man,
asking
Steve.
yourself that question.
Yeah, yeah. The good kind of reset, gut check, clarification. Yeah. Man, Steve, what a delight. Thank you for all of this. The last thing here in the spotlight is how can listeners learn more about you or about your season? You mentioned you write, you do photography, do you have a website? Do you have socials? Like if people want to get to know Steve or the Norton better, where should they go?
So I have a couple. My Instagram is Hey Y'all Farm, and it's HAYALL_farm. And those are just photographs of the farm that I'm on, that I live on, and the animals that are part of the farm from different times. But professionally, the Norton Center, Norton Center. It would show you the programming that we're doing, and we just announced our new season. And then in terms of engagement, I have a LinkedIn group, and it's called Essential Engagement, Connecting Communities Through Cultural Programming. And it's pretty new, and I'm just showcasing, spotlighting different arts interactions that I see that are relevant and connect community. And some of them are my own. Others, actually, one of the profiles was Guitars for Vets. And I met the guy who is responsible for a lot of that program through Last Out. When I saw it in Topeka, I met him. We did the Generosity of Scars workshop together. And he's just fascinating. So I wanted to do a profile, and that is maybe you can post the LinkedIn where to go to that group page.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, all of that. I'll put direct links to all of that right in the show notes for everybody. And Steve, again, just thank you so much for all this amazing info and for your enthusiasm and your honesty. I just really appreciate what you've shared with everybody today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll look forward to getting to talk with and work with you again soon.
You've been listening to the Page and Stage podcast. All my thanks to this week's guest and to all of you out there for listening. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the show notes. If you enjoyed or found value in this podcast, I'd like to ask a quick favor. Leaving a short review or comment helps me out a ton. It tells the algorithmic overlords that people are listening, and it helps other folks discover the show. So, if you can post a review over at Apple Podcasts, and I've left a link and easy instructions in the show notes, or leave a comment on this episode on Substack or YouTube, wherever you happen to be listening or watching, I would be incredibly grateful. Plus, I do my absolute best to respond to every comment. Let's get into a fun conversation. I use an incredible online app, Riverside.fm, to produce this podcast. If you are interested in creating your own podcast or other audio or video content, I cannot recommend them highly enough. I left a link in the show notes so you can check them out for yourself. Both of my podcasts live over at pageandstage.art. And if you visit, you can even sign up for free to receive every future episode right into your inbox, as well as my weekly newsletter full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes. Again, that's pageandstage.art. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.